Hello, everybody, and welcome to Atheist Sunday School, your one-stop shop for everything Atheist Sunday and school. And boy, do we have a show for you today. Today we are covering Zechariah chapters 9 through 14.
Also known as Second Zechariah by some.
Yeah, by scholars, really only.
Yeah, but who listens to scholars?
I don't know, some pegs somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't you rather listen to some guy who went to indoctrination school?
I would, yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah.
But you know what? Unfortunately, I don't have that. I'm not prone to that.
Oh, no.
Unfortunate. So, yeah, today we are talking about Zechariah. Now, pretty much every commentator agrees that they are from a different prophet or sets of prophets, different people in general. Because you know how in the first one, it was set in a really discrete historical setting. Like, it gave you, like, actual dates. We don't have that here. In fact, so sometimes it can be really hard to tell exactly where this is from, at least the historical setting for this, or the background for it, because it changes a lot.
That is,
as we go
this
on.
is more discreet, whereas that was more distinct.
Oh, right.
Yes.
You're right. I'm dumb. So yeah, that. So this one, we're gonna have a lot of changing tones, a lot of changing ways of text. Like for example,
Ways of text.
Ways of text. I don't know, man. I did not get much sleep last night.
You know what you forgot? Spinny wheelie.
I know we're gonna get to it.
We'll get to it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of different forms of text is what I was wanting to say. I only got like 4 hours of sleep, and that's like normal. But it's been, I don't know.
Sleep more, bro.
I really should, but like there's always something to do. So from chapters 9 to 14, it goes from prose to poetry to like an oracle, and then kind of swings around back again. So it kind of changes, and we didn't really have that change in the first part of the book.
Right.
It was just very precise. Like, here is a date, and here's the stuff to go along with it. Right.
Mm.
So yeah, before I get into a more detailed commentary, we can spinny wheelie. It is the first Sunday of the month.
Yes.
Which means that we give away a T-shirt to one of our patrons.
Yes. So without further ado, let's
Spinny Wheelie.
There's only 4 guys on there.
What?
There's 4 guys on there this month?
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Let's take a look. Michael.
You won the shirt.
Yes.
It was pretty close to landing.
Well, Michael,
That would have
can
meant we
get
have to make
yourself
another shirt.
a wonderful shirt.
Yeah, so I'll be messaging you, and you can just tell me whatever shirt you want.
Yeah.
And then we'll get that on the way to you. So let's so of course, we talked about the historical context a lot last time.
Yeah, but I have the King James version of the Bible.
I have the English Standard version of the Bible.
We also have Robert Alter's translation and commentary of the Hebrew Bible.
We have so we also have the first part of this, but this is Zechariah 9 through 4, a new translation with introduction and commentary by Carol L. Myers and Eric M. Myers.
9 through 14.
9 through 14. Man,
Yes.
I need
We also
I needed
have
some coffee or something.
We
That's
also
what I
have
needed.
the Holy Scriptures according to some Jews and the New King James version of the Bible.
I can make coffee.
Do it. I want some too.
Yeah, that'd be really good. Man, I'm just off today, just in general.
Wow.
Yeah, not great.
You need to stop
It's worse than
having
usual.
those late night romps through downtown Milwaukee.
That's definitely not what's happening.
Oh, shoot.
Unless you want to count me and my computer.
That's a romp.
through downtown Milwaukee. Yeah.
Yeah. We also have the Old Testament survey from the New Interpreter's Bible.
And I mean we have a Greek Septuagint as well.
And Eerdman's commentary on the Bible.
Yeah. We got a lot of stuff here. So I can start talking about the times. So when it comes to like the period of the temple rebuilding, right? So you have Cyrus comes in and he's like, hey, all right, everyone can go back to their homeland and everything seems great, right? It's looking up.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we haven't talked about too much on this show is the Greco-Persian Wars.
So tell me about it.
So essentially, after the return from exile, there was a lot of pushback from the Greeks when Persia came rolling on in, and this caused a lot of strife, as you would think, and this like we can see historically speaking a change in demographics, for example. So even though everyone returned, the population densities weren't the same. Even the populations themselves weren't the same. They moved closer to the coast, and that made like trade more popular. So you have a lot of influence from Greece coming in. Like this is the point where Greek influence is really starting to show in that part of the world, like way more than it did before. So during these wars, people moved away from like the I guess they're more agricultural lands that they used before.
Yeah.
Like the hill country and all that stuff. Like everyone just kind of changed. And there was I'm going to get into some of the more specific political developments here. So yeah, after they returned, it was a province, a Persian province called Yehud, and it's for Judah. It's for the land of Israel.
Yes.
So the modus operandi established for the leaders of Yehud by 515, by which a series of governors and high priests successfully managed the secular and political affairs of Yehud, along with its cultural and religious traditions, did not last more than a generation and a half, possibly two. The governorship was linked at first with the descendants of the Davidic dynasty, but the last Davidite, Davidite, I don't know, to serve in public office after the return was Shelomith at the very end of the 6th century or the beginning of the 5th century. The termination of her position and the apparent disappearance of the Davidic family from public life in the early 5th century were perhaps indicative of a general deterioration in the internal affairs of Yehud, such as is reflected in the prophetic books of 2nd Zechariah and Malachi, and its historical reportage of the books of Ezra and Nehemiah. There is no doubt that the fairly stable situation achieved in late 6th century Judah was badly shaken by the significant world events that were taking place around it in the 5th century, and that would be the Greco-Persian Wars, which undoubtedly preoccupied the very regime that had given the post-exilic community its relative independence within the overall structure of the Achaemenid, that's Persian, imperial rule. The onset of these wars at the end of the 6th century placed the imperial aims of the Indo-European Persians in direct conflict with those of the Greeks. So, quick, I guess kind of a quick history lesson. So Darius I crossed the Bosporus in 512 BCE in an attempt to extend his power as far north as the mouth of the Danube. As a result, the Greek cities of Ionia and Cyprus declared open rebellion against the Persians in 499. They were joined by Athens in this endeavor. Once begun, hostilities lasted for generations and pitted east against west. The Greco-Persian conflict was a struggle whose outcome in the 5th century, with Persia holding on to many of its territories in eastern Mediterranean lands, would be reversed in the 4th century by Alexander. The superior mobility of Athens, because of its great navy, led to what was probably Darius's most humiliating defeat in 490 BCE at the Battle of Marathon. Very famous battle. His son Xerxes...
That's where they ran away.
Yeah. So his son Xerxes I carried on the struggle against Greece, but suffered great defeats at Artemisium, Thermopylae, which, by the way, is that Thermopylae was the basis for 300, and Salamis. And the Greek allies succeeded in expelling the Persians from Asia Minor and Cyprus through major victories at Plataea, in Thessaly, at Mycale in Ionia, and at Eurymedon in Pamphylia. So when trying to figure out the exact context for some of these some of these prophecies, it is kind of hard to tell we just kind of get a sense of Greco-Persian War.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably the best we can say. There have been scholars that placed it after like some Egyptian revolt. There were it's usually around the Egyptian revolt. Man. The achievement of Babylonia's independence from Persia during this period must have had immediate repercussions in Palestine. Such was the hypothesis about a response in Yehud proposed by Morgenstern decades ago. Morgenstern argued that the first effect in Yehud was in an attempt to install a new Judean king on the throne, whom he identified as Menahem, which we had reference to in Isaiah, I believe. According to Morgenstern's theory, Xerxes thereupon urged the surrounding nations to form a coalition and attack Jerusalem, which was destroyed along with the temple. It was into such a setting that Ezra was then sent to rebuild the destroyed temple and to reestablish the cult. In his recent and significant work on the subject, Haugland shares with Morgenstern the assessment that the Persian Wars in the West had a major influence on Persian provinces as well as on Babylon, although the specific assessment of how that influence was manifest diverges from Morgenstern's theory. In analyzing the archaeological remains of various 5th century Palestinian sites, Haugland cast doubt on the view held by numerous archaeologists and biblical scholars that there were wholesale disturbances in Yehud at about 475 BCE. Individual scholars did not directly attribute their views to the influence of Morgenstern's theory about the Babylonian revolt, yet their ideas indirectly contributed to supporting his assertion that in the 2nd and 3rd decades of the 5th century, there were widespread disturbances in Palestine, and that those events are reflected in the archaeological remains of sites up and down the Levantine coast.
So, I can say a few things here.
All right.
Second Zechariah, chapters 9 through 14,
Mm-hmm.
presents a complex and often discordant vision of the future, and in literary style vastly different from those of First Zechariah. Apart from chapter 11, the prophetic persona is so prominent in First Zechariah is completely absent from these chapters, as are any concrete references to their occasion. They refer to no identifiable person, no Zerubbabel or Joshua, and no Zechariah. They provide sparse and uncertain clues to their date, and the religious, social, and political concerns they address can be inferred only with great difficulty and only tentatively. If our Bibles did not bind these latter chapters together with the first 8, we may find few reasons to connect them with Zechariah. Indeed, some have suggested that Zechariah 9 through 11, 12 through 14, and Malachi are a 3-part prophetic collection, 2 parts of which are now joined artificially to Zechariah 1 through 8. Among the reasons for this suggestion is the presence in Zechariah 9:1, 12:1, and Malachi 1:1 of a phrase that occurs in each of these verses and nowhere else. It can be translated oracle of the word of Yahweh, though neither the NIV nor the NRSV translates it this way. It's clear in Zechariah 11:17 and 13:7 that the shepherd is a figure of leadership or within the community. This is not obvious in 10:2, and it is not the case in 11:1 through 3. Neither is it made explicit in either 11:4 through 17 or 13:7 through 9 exactly what leaders or what form of leadership, civil, cultic, prophetic, is in view. However, Zechariah 11 and the larger context of chapter 13 strongly suggest that it was dated within conflict within the community, i.e. within the community that can be described as Yahweh's sheep. Since the work of Otto Ploger, and more recently of Paul Hansen, it has become common to interpret 2nd Zechariah against the background of intracommunal conflict. Such interpretation is rendered problematic by the very obscurity of the text, by the absence of concrete references to the people or events, and thus by permanent uncertainty about the times and circumstances in which these texts were written, collected, edited, and published. However, it seems clear enough that there is a conflict between the future as restoration envisioned in chapters 9 through 10 and the utopia envisioned in chapters 12 and 14, and it may be the nature of that conflict is reflected in chapters 11 and 13. Second Zechariah cannot be dated with any certainty. In addition, its several chapters or parts of them may come from different times. Proposals range from the 7th to the 2nd century BCE.
Yeah, although I would say that
Well, that's the Persian stuff is addressed here. Chapters 12 through 14 are related to changes in Persian policy toward Judah and Jerusalem at the time of Nehemiah, just after the middle of the 5th century BC. At this time, Persia sought to strengthen its control over and military defenses within the eastern Mediterranean area and to more effectively centralize the administration of Judah and Jerusalem. Such social changes as these efforts brought about do not explain Second Zechariah, but they provide a plausible occasion for the violence and salvation that Jerusalem is expected to suffer, according to chapters 12 and 14.
So I think that looking through this, I was trying to find a part that would summarize things pretty well. And I think here's where it would be. In short, the impetus for such change and revision, i.e. the expansion of the existing book of Zechariah, was undoubtedly a combination of factors. The general impact of the Greco-Egyptian rebellion and its aftermath, the greater control exerted by the Persians on their Levantine holdings, especially Yehud, and an awareness that a significant repopulation of Jerusalem and Yehud and attendant economic prosperity, both of which should have followed upon temple restoration, had not materialized. And perhaps, number 4, the perception that prophecy in its traditional form was at an end and that the authoritative prophetic works and words of the past needed to be collected for posterity. That last one, yeah, not too sure about that one. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we do know that later, at least in the time of the Maccabees or something, it was already an end to the time of prophecy.
Yeah.
So there was one thing I did want to mention here, how all the chapters are related. This is actually kind of an interesting chart. You're not going to really see it well, but
hold it up. It's better than you think. Yeah.
All right. So yeah, it's kind of crisscrossy. Do you see the X's?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So this shows how every part is related. So it shows.
When you hold it up so close before, by the way, it was hyper blurry. That was
it?
Perfect.
Oh,
yeah.
Great. Hyper blurry. Love it.
No, I meant this was perfect.
Oh, okay. Good. So it takes parts of each chapter and relates them to other chapters, and it has this interesting parallelism, where it's what you call it, like a tic-tac-toe board or something like that. What would you describe this as? So chapter 9 has they're not going to relate them to each other, right? So as they go down the list,
it's a chart.
Well, yeah, it's a chart, but then so. Okay, yeah, I guess. All right. But there are links between each and every one of these chapters to each and every one of these chapters.
Some links, but there's an argument in here that's a little lengthy that describes why 9 through 11 and 12 through 14 would be different collections.
Okay.
So I'll get into that. The material in these chapters is visionary in the broadest sense of the term. It envisions the future. Of course, this is true of much prophetic literature, in particular First Zechariah. However, two interrelated features of Second Zechariah mark its unusual visionary character. First, to articulate the vision, it refers extensively to other Old Testament texts. Envisioning the future is here a literary and even an exegetical activity. To some extent, this is true of First Zechariah as well. Its visions and oracles draw especially on Isaiah and Jeremiah. But in contrast to the symmetrical arrangement of visions and oracles of Zechariah 1 through 6, Second Zechariah exhibits a profusion of genres. Invectives, threats, heraldic odes, promises, extended metaphors, symbolic actions, and others in a form more anthology-like than symmetrical. Second, As a way of envisioning the future, Zechariah 9 through 14 re-envisions the past. For example, the poems in chapters 9 and 10 not only draw from earlier texts, but also portray the future as a recapitulation and thus as a restoration, without a single specific reference to present circumstances. Duncan.
Oh, thank you. Spasiba. You learned what that means, yes, Ruben?
No.
Spasiba?
Spasiba?
Means thank you.
Oh. Wow. Spasiba.
In Russian.
Yeah. The description of Yahweh's march in 9:1 through 8 could be set in almost any period in Judah's history, and 10:11 speaks as if Assyria and Egypt were still the world's great imperial powers. The past and precisely God's action on behalf of Israel is paradigmatic, and these poems draw from earlier texts to construe the paradigm. The narrative in 11:4 through 14 complicates this paradigm, suggesting conflict and disintegration rather than restoration. Although it is an autobiographical narrative, this text can be read as a symbol of Israel's history and its future. Even the ominous announcements in 12:2 through 3 and 14:1 through 2 that the world will gather for war against Jerusalem and recapitulate the past. Once before, all the kingdoms of the earth fought against Jerusalem, with exile as the result. On the other hand, the future envisioned in Zechariah 12, and much more so in chapter 14, is not simply a restoration, it is a utopia. While restoration leaves intact conditions that can lead again to disintegration and exile, the utopian future of chapters 12 and 14 eliminates those conditions. Here, the future becomes radically discontinuous with the past. And such radical discontinuity involves violent conflict. These chapters depict a world at war, with its focus on Jerusalem. In 2nd Zechariah, the ordered world of 1st Zechariah is fractured, awaiting a new ordering. These observations make plausible the suggestion that 2nd Zechariah comprises two collections, chapters 9 through 11 and 12 through 14, each designated as an oracle. The differences between them involve style and rhetoric, as well as content. For example, the first collection, 9 through 11, makes extensive use of subordinate causal or explanatory clauses introduced by ki, because, or for, characteristic of prophetic speech. This conjunction occurs 20 times in chapters 9 through 11, but only 4 times in 12 through 14, 3 of them in 13, 3 through 5.
Interesting.
By contrast, the phrase "on that day" punctuates chapters 12 through 14, where it occurs 17 times in reference to the future. It occurs only at 9:16 within chapters 9 through 11. Still, the material within each of these collections, 9 through 11 and 12 through 14, is not all of a piece. The narrative of 11:4 through 14 departs abruptly from the eschatological visions in chapters 9 through 10. And the continuity between and within those two chapters is editorial. Forming a part of this continuity is the motif of sheep or the flock and shepherds, which first appears at 9:16. It's picked up again in 10:2 and then in 11:1 through 3, and is explored at length in 11:4 through 14. Finally, in 11:15 through 17, the shepherd suffers a violent punishment. Similarly, chapters 12 and 14 present different scenarios of the future, and they are separated by 13:2 through 6, which predicts the elimination of prophets. But chapter 13 has links to both chapters 12 and chapter 14. The elimination of prophets is joined to the cleansing offered to the house of David, and the stabbing of prophets echoes the stabbing or piercing of an anonymous victim in 12:10. The conclusion of chapter 13 in verses 7 through 9 envisions another kind of cleansing by fire, which will kill 1/3 of the population. This motif introduces the war and exile of 14:1 through 2. For these reasons, Zechariah 13 is pivotal within the second collection, chapters 12 through 14, which is distinct from 9 through 11. While it is evident that chapters 9 through 11 and 12 through 14 are two collections, their independence is only relative. In its concluding verses, chapter 13 returns to the sheep/shepherd motif of chapters 9 through 11. In 13:7, the shepherd is struck with a sword and the sheep scattered. This is the only occurrence of the motif in chapters 12 through 14, and it echoes 11:17. There, too, the shepherd encounters a sword. The act of violence against the shepherd has a different meaning in the two passages, but it does forge a connection between the two larger collections or oracles, just as chapter 13 is pivotal within chapters 12 through 14. So also chapter 11 is pivotal between chapters 9 through 10 and 12 through 14.
Yeah, and I think it's especially chapter 11 that was quoted the most. Like I think that was used as a basis for the story of of Judas and the field of blood in the New Testament. So many phrases are just taken directly from that to kind of create that narrative. So I think we have essentially covered, the stuff that we have to cover, the historical context.
Well, not the theology.
Well, I mean, we're going to get to the theology because we're going to be reading it.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think,
you're telling me you want me to begin?
Yeah, we can begin.
All right. Well, let me drink some coffee.
All right. You can drink
You
some
should
coffee.
drink some coffee.
I should, because I am just dead on the inside and the outside.
Yep.
Zonk.
I am a zombie. Hello, world. Go on.
It's a miracle. Chapter 9. The burden of the word of the Lord in the land of Hadrach and Damascus shall be the rest thereof, when the eyes of man, as of all the tribes of Israel, shall be toward the Lord.
So, one thing that I want to point out here, there's a heading to this apparently. It doesn't really show through the KJV translation, but there is a heading. So a portent, the word of the Lord in the land of Hadrach.
So one might say that heading is important.
Yes, you would. Yes, you would. Perfect.
Awful.
So the very anomaly of this heading signals that we have moved on to a new unit of prophecies in regard to both style and subject matter. These last chapters of the book are quite different. Yeah, we talked about that. That was what we spent the whole show on so far. And Hadrach, it's a city in Assyria north of Damascus.
Mm-hmm. And Hamath also shall border thereby, Tyrus and Zidon, though it be very wise. And Tyrus did build herself a stronghold, and heaped up silver as the dust, and fine gold as the mire of the streets. So they're very wealthy, as Tyre usually is.
Yeah.
Behold,
Behold!
the Lord will cast her out, and he will smite her power in the sea, and she shall be devoured with fire.
Oh, so there's one thing on her wealth, actually. So that is in verse 4, right?
Yeah. Well, no, that's in verse 3.
Oh, verse 3, right? Because look at the Hebrew here. All right. So for her wealth, the Hebrew has 3 different meanings: wealth, wall, and military force. And one must concede that any of these 3 senses would work here. This translation opts for wealth because of the invocation of silver and gold. Makes sense.
Ashkelon shall see it and fear. Gaza also shall see it and be very sorrowful. And Ekron, for her expectation shall be ashamed. And the king shall perish from Gaza. And Ashkelon shall not be inhabited. And a bastard shall dwell in Ashdod. And I will cut off the pride of the Philistines.
Yeah, so we have a whole lot of big cities here being name dropped.
Yeah. A bastard shall dwell in Ashdod.
Yeah. So these are Philistine cities like Tyre and Sidon on the Mediterranean coast, but considerably to the south. When the Philistines hear of the fall of the Phoenician towns, they are seized with panic. So for all these towns, it seems like there's a list that's a lot like this in pretty much every other, or not in every other, in a lot of other parts of the prophetic literature. So in Amos 1:7-8, Zephaniah 2:4, and Jeremiah 25:20. So you have Gaza, Ashdod, Ashkelon, and Ekron. Sometimes the order changes. Well, it seems like the order is a little bit different in all of them, but all of them are mentioned, except in one of them except in this one when Ashkelon and Gaza are mentioned twice, it seems. But
Right.
these are some cities that are always mentioned, apparently.
What's the background image that we have today?
Oh, right. That's supposed to be the guy throwing money to the potter, because that text is from. I mean, it's in Jesus' story, right? But this is like we have imagery of that.
Okay.
I don't know if it's supposed to be exactly Judas, but it can essentially, it'll work today. Listen, okay, it's hard to find background images for prophetic literature in general unless it's like crazy.
I wonder what we'll use for Malachi.
Yeah, right? Like what?
Yeah. Anyways,
Some guys standing around like a city.
so basically this chapter so far, and it looks like for a little bit more now, is just talking about how all of the other nations will be screwed.
Yeah.
And I will take away his blood out of his mouth, and his abominations from between his teeth. But he that remaineth, even he shall be for our God. And he shall be as a governor in Judah, and Ekron as a Jebusite. And I will encamp about mine house because of the army.
So this is kind of interesting here. Take away the blood from his mouth and the disgusting things from between his teeth.
I think they're referring to the pride of the Philistines.
Well,
And cleaning your teeth.
kind of. So the consumption of blood is explicitly forbidden in the Torah, right?
Mhm.
It's life. So you shouldn't be having any of that. The disgusting things are probably pork, a staple of Philistine diet, as the evidence of bones uncovered in Philistine sites indicates. The Philistines in this utopian scenario will put aside their odious practices and join the people of Israel.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's I guess it would be a reference then to them eating things that they shouldn't be eating.
Yeah. And I will encamp about mine house because of the army, because of him that passeth by, and because of him that returneth. And no oppressor shall pass through them any more. For now have I seen with mine eyes. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold!
Behold!
Thy king cometh unto thee. He is just and having salvation, lowly and riding upon an ass, and upon a colt, the foal of an ass.
Oh, so so that is referenced. That was kind of the background for when Jesus got to Jerusalem, I think. So one thing here, kind of interesting, when it says your king, it's important to note the possessive feminine suffix on the word king. The king hereby announced is the king of Zion and Jerusalem, whose attention is evoked by the female idioms daughter Zion and daughter Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And the term Melech, king itself, is a loaded one in the present context, which is unmistakably eschatological, and which, it foreshadows, right, the emergence of messianic language. So this is, I'm going to just skip a little bit here. The attitudes toward kingship in late biblical prophecy must be seen against the backdrop of the political status of the province of Yehud in the post-exilic period under Persian rule. Among the final three canonical books of prophecy, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi, the most heightened royal eschatological passage is in Haggai, which focuses on a historical figure, Zerubbabel, to express its support of the Davidic dynasty. Although Zerubbabel is usually addressed as Pekah, or governor, in recognition of his civil leadership. In Haggai 2:23, he is called servant and signet, terms used to describe the ideal role of an Israelite ruler in special relationship to Yahweh and normally reserved for David.
And I will cut off the chariot from Ephraim, and the horse from Jerusalem, and the battle bow shall be cut off, and he shall speak peace unto the heathen. And his dominion shall be from sea even to sea, and from the river even to the ends of the earth. There's multiple ways to interpret that.
Yeah, absolutely.
The ends of the earth could just be the continent that they're on. That could mean that God's not in charge of North and South America, or, Australia, or
come on,
Antarctica.
Australia isn't real. Come on, get out of here.
Yeah, okay.
So which verse was that? I'm trying to find it here. Was that?
That was verse 10, but it would be 11 in altar.
Okay, yeah, there we go. Well, actually, no, it does.
It cuts out the chariot, and then the horse, and then the bow.
Yeah, I see that.
And then
Okay.
dominion.
Ordinarily, this language would signal a prophecy of doom. Here, however, it conveys the idea that the implements of warfare will be cast aside because the ideal ruler will be able to parlay for peace with the nations.
Yes. As for thee also, by the blood of thy covenant I have sent forth thy prisoners out of the pit wherein is no water. So this is a reference to a certain prophet, Daniel, being in the lion's pit.
I suppose that would work.
Yeah. And also, there were other prophets who were put into pits. Jeremiah was in a pit, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not sure about the word pit there. Maybe it's supposed to be about Sheol.
Could be Sheol.
Yeah.
Turn you to the stronghold, ye prisoners of hope. Even today do I declare that I will render double unto thee. When I have bent Judah for me, filled the bow with a frame, and raised up thy sons, O Zion, against thy sons, O Greece, and made thee as the sword of a mighty man.
Yes,
we get very few references so far in the Bible at all to Greece.
Yeah, exactly. So that was, a big reason why this has been put into that context.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we very rarely get Greece, and here we got Greece.
Yeah. Because usually
it's not usually included with the nations.
Right, but even if they include Greek city-states, they usually don't refer to it as Greece. Like, I recall, I don't remember if it was in a book or if it was in pseudepigrapha or apocrypha, but there was some correspondence with Sparta at one point. And Crete, yeah, but they didn't refer to them as Greece.
Yeah, so that's in verse 13, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the word that's used is Javan, I guess, or I'm not sure how it should be pronounced, but I guess it doesn't really matter. Yeah, against
is it in Hebrew?
It's probably.
There's no
Yavan,
J.
I guess.
There's no J.
All right.
In Hebrew,
So
it would be Yavan, probably.
Okay. So yeah, I guess that would be Greece, but the word there is Yavan, I guess. Mm-hmm. So yeah, more about that pit. So the noun bor usually means cistern or well. People could also be cast into such an installation to be held prisoner. We've talked about that already. As an extension of its usage to denote a water installation, i.e. an enclosed watertight space, it is found with house in Exodus. Bet Habor, okay. To indicate a dungeon or prison. Just as water cannot escape from a cistern or well unless someone comes to draw it up, so a person or persons can be confined in a space unless someone releases them. In this particular case, the prison imagery seems clear, especially because the word prisoners appears in this verse and the next. Zechariah 9:11 uses pit in reference to the catastrophe of exile in much the same way that the author of Lamentations in 3:53 and 55 compares the helplessness and pain of the destruction to that of being thrown into a pit.
Yeah. I want to note, Eerdmans here talks about the Greece statement. Says, the phrase, your sons, O Greece, has aroused much discussion about the date of the passage. Most probably, the phrase is an addition from the time after 333 BC, when Judah was under the hegemony of the successors of Alexander the Great. However, if the passage is regarded as original, two possibilities arise. First, that the whole passage is to be dated to the period after 333 BC. Second, that the passage dates from the Persian period, 540 through 333, during which time the Greeks were often at war with Persia, which was something that you talked about before.
Yeah. So the Myers, they also discuss this. They say that many commentators would like to delete this phrase, which is the object of the preposition against, your sons, O Greece, because it appears to intrude on the metric structure of this line, and so must be an error stemming from dictography. Although opposing the deletion of this phrase on metric grounds, Rudolph amends it to warriors of Greece, basing it on Genesis 14:14 and a double haplography. Perhaps he does so in part because of the unique pairing of a direct address to Greece and Zion. Neither the deletion nor emendation is convincing, however. Removal of the phrase, although creating closer parallelism, eliminates the central object of Yahweh's anger, Greece, which appears in nearly all the major textual traditions. Most exegetes have, in fact, argued for a Maccabean or Hellenistic date for the redaction, precisely because of this reference to the Greeks and the putative mention above to the siege of Tyre by the Greeks. Others have interpreted the appearance of Greece as a gloss meant to apply an existing prophecy to a later circumstance. At the same time, it could be a gloss on Genesis 10:4 or other passages where the term Yavan, Yavan, occurs. And the fact of the matter is that Sons of Greece is quite appropriate to the mid-5th century BCE, when the Greeks and the Persians were locked in a historic struggle for control of the Eastern Mediterranean.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So we talked about that stuff before. And the Lord shall be seen over them, and his arrow shall go forth as the lightning. And the Lord God shall blow the trumpet, and shall go with whirlwinds of the south.
Yeah, so that takes up a lot of ancient imagery.
Yes.
Both the war and storm imagery.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually talked about this before the show. We were talking about Yam. Chris and I were. So the metaphor continues to derive from the world of myth, the cosmic realm of the god of the storm, of Marduk rushing forth to duel Tiamat with his arrows, and his storm chariot of Baal, the cloud rider, marching out to vanquish Yam. That's a quotation from P.D. Hansen. Chapter 9 reflects many ancient mythic elements, but such echoes of mythic or divine warrior language, which appears in the earlier biblical materials, should be viewed as part of Second Zechariah's general tendency to echo the language of authoritative literature. Mm-hmm. Which, if there was a chart earlier in here, which basically they went down all the imagery in Zechariah and linked it to earlier stuff.
Omicron.
Right. Everyone's gonna die, so they linked it to earlier prophetic books. And even, pretty much everything older than this, there was imagery in here that can link it to something else.
The Lord of hosts shall defend them, and they shall devour, and subdue with sling stones, and they shall drink and make a noise as through wine, and they shall be filled like bowls, and the corners of the altar. And the Lord their God shall save them in that day as the flock of his people, for they shall be as the stones of a crown, lifted up as an ensign above his land.
So,
for how great is his goodness, and how great is his beauty! Corn shall make the young men cheerful, and new wine the maids.
Wow. Okay, so these are pretty different here. So for the KJV, if you want to check. So for verse 15, the Lord of armies shall defend them, and the sling stone shall consume and conquer, and drink blood like wine, and be filled like ritual basins. Was it drink blood like wine in yours?
No,
I didn't think
it just says, and subdue with the sling stones, and they shall drink and make a noise as through wine.
Yeah. So the very different there. The Masoretic text has drink and roar like wine, but the Septuagint reads dam, blood, which is more plausible. Drinking blood like wine is a topos of ancient Hebrew martial poetry. So that's why Alter translates it that way. So it's some kind of gluttony, right?
Yeah.
And then, yeah, yours also ended differently, I think. So for verse 17, how goodly and how lovely the young men like new grain, and the virgins like lush new wine.
Yeah, it says, for how great is his goodness and how great his beauty, corn shall make the young men cheerful and new wine the maids.
Yeah, so these are...
So I could see why they would translate this in different ways. It probably just has to do with their interpretation of the phrasing of the original language.
Yeah. Although it does... It's very different.
Slightly changes the meaning.
Yeah.
But the essential meaning is the same, right?
Yeah, I suppose.
Anyways, that is the end of chapter 9. We've finished one of the many chapters we're doing today, and we're 45 minutes in, almost 46.
We had that introduction.
Yes. So if you're enjoying the stream so far, give it a like, share it with your friends, family, neighbors, confidants, and we can continue on.
Your prophets, people in prison, they want to see this, right?
Your friends in exile.
Yeah, absolutely. Those guys especially. Like they have nothing else to do. They're in exile. You should probably give them something.
Yeah. So I want to point out that we start getting shepherd imagery in this this chapter. Now, typically, Eerdmans points this out. The shepherd is a well-known symbol in the ancient Near East for a king. The interpretation of the passage depends on the identification of the shepherds and male goats in 10:3. Are they foreign kings and rulers who have oppressed Judah, or are they Judah's own leaders who have failed the people?
Maybe they're just the friends of Job.
Advocates of both views can be found among the commentators. In favor of the view that Judah's leaders are meant is the fact that a prominent theme throughout Zechariah 9-11 is leadership within Judah. The likely sense is, therefore, that God will punish the existing leaders, and because of his special concern for Judah, will produce the leadership, the cornerstone, the tent peg, the battle bow, from the house of Judah. The NRSV renders the Hebrew "from him," that is, the house of Judah, as "from them" in verse 4 to avoid gendered language. However, it is not simply the new leaders who will deliver Judah. A whole series of promises spoken by God in the first person make it clear that only God's power will suffice to gather the people from their places of exile in ways that recall the Exodus. This, again, is a passage that cannot be dated. The similarities with Isaiah 40-55 are obvious, yet there is no mention of Babylon. We have to be satisfied with ignorance.
Hooray!
What a shame. What a shame, right?
Yeah.
So we can hop into chapter 10 then.
Yes.
Ask rain from the Lord in the season of the spring rain. From the Lord who gives the storm clouds, and he will give them showers of rain to everyone, the vegetation in the field.
So, first of all, in the Hebrew, two synonyms.
Two synonyms, love it. I mean, I was messing up way worse than that today.
Metar, geshem are joined in the construct state, signifying intensification for drenching rain. Now, the author of this initial section of Zechariah 10 calls upon the Israelites to request of Yahweh rain in their seasons.
Which is when you should get them. Everything in its season.
Rain all the time. There you go.
Everything in its season.
Yeah, they it's basically asking for a good harvest.
Yeah.
I mean,
so it continues on here. For the household gods utter nonsense, and the diviners see lies. They tell false dreams and give empty consolation. Therefore the people wander like sheep. They are afflicted, for lack of a shepherd.
So the household gods, the teraphim, those are domestic icons.
Can't have any of those. Remember all that stuff in the what was it, the Apocalypse of Abraham, the very beginning of it?
Yes, yeah, where they talk about Abraham's father.
Yeah, he had all these household gods, and Abraham was like, no, bad.
Of course, there's the famous story of Rachel and the teraphim.
That too.
Genesis 31:19, and by the story of the household shrine of Micah, Judges 17:5. In addition to these well-known passages, teraphim as objects probably somewhat smaller than life-size figure in another prominent tale, that of Michal's deception in 1 Samuel 19:11 through 17. Altogether, the word teraphim appears in 15 different texts, many of them presenting no additional clues as to the identity of such objects. Thus, although much scholarly attention has been given to these relatively obscure objects and the puzzling practices associated with them, the actual appearance and function of teraphim remains somewhat elusive.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like household religion here. Just kind of your local deities, maybe a deity that is meant to protect the house, or they can help with mourning. Like they're used a lot in mourning rituals.
They stop the domovoi.
Yeah, entirely. So yeah, it looks like this is just like once again, you got to throw in some false religion stuff somewhere. You got to throw in something against the pagans, right? Because otherwise you're not a real prophet, biblically speaking. My anger is hot against the shepherds, and I will punish the leaders, for the Lord of hosts cares for his flock, the house of Judah, and will make them like his majestic steed in battle. Kind of playing off the chariot thing in the last chapter, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess these, because the people didn't have a shepherd, right? But he's saying that his anger is hot against the shepherds. So is this talking about like the foreign rulers in the land?
So Alter interprets it as an epithet for leaders.
Sure. Like, is it supposed to be like a
Eerdmans
mocking
commented that it was likely the leaders of Judah.
Okay.
But I'm looking over this, which is kind of hard to navigate.
It is, yeah. So it basically goes like any like phrase. It goes phrase by phrase. So it is kind of hard to follow. Although it is more, I think as a commentary, it's probably written better because it has like a lot of exposition on every single phrase.
If they just had like in bold the
that would be nice, like a new
verse
chapter
headings,
or
right?
so yeah, a new verse,
yeah,
that would be nice. Unfortunately, they don't. So yeah, that's in that's in verse 3.
So they comment that it might be leaders of Judah. In other areas, it might represent prophets and false prophecy.
Sure. Yeah, for the Lord of hosts cares for his flock, the house of Judah, and he will make them like his majestic steed in battle. From him shall come the cornerstone, from him the tent peg, from him the battle bow, from him every ruler, all of them together. So he's going to provide everything.
These are all metaphors for the leaders or champions of the people. At the end of the line, the literal reference of all of these is introduced in commanders. It should be noted that the Hebrew term used for commander, nogais, generally has a negative meaning, taskmaster, overseer, but that cannot be the case here. The shift in meaning may reflect the fluidity of late biblical Hebrew.
They shall be like mighty men in battle, trampling the foe in the mud of the streets. They shall fight because the Lord is with them, and they shall put to shame the riders on horses.
Yep. So they're like war heroes.
Yeah. And this plays into...
And, of course, they overcome the riders on horses, which is a typical symbol of military power.
Yep. And kind of plays off them being like the majestic steed in battle.
Now,
It takes that simile.
I want to note that Alter translates this as trampling the mud of the streets in battle. And he says about it, it's not entirely evident why the warriors should be trampling mud. Perhaps this is intended as an image of conquest. The troops stomped through the streets of the conquered city, overwhelming all that stand in their way. It's also possible that the object of the verb is dropped out. The literal sense of the Hebrew is in the mud of the streets. And that the original text might have read, trampling the slain like the mud of the streets.
Also, yeah, that's why they have trampling the foe in the mud of the streets here. I will strengthen the house of Judah, and I will save the house of Joseph. And, of course, house of Joseph, we kind of get that less and less as we go on, huh? I will bring them back because I have compassion on them, and they shall be as though I had not rejected them. But you did, though.
Yeah.
You did. For I am the Lord their God, and I will answer them. Man, this God, though.
Yeah.
Then Ephraim shall become like a mighty warrior, and their hearts shall be glad as with wine. Their children shall see it and be glad. Their hearts shall rejoice in the Lord.
Yeah. So basically, the house of Joseph and Ephraim, they're talking about large and powerful tribes, right?
Yeah. I will whistle for them.
Whistling appears elsewhere as a signal for the marshaling of troops, a sound that may have been produced with some sort of wooden whistle.
Gotcha. And gather them in, for I have redeemed them, and they shall be as many as they were before. Though I scattered them among the nations, yet in far countries they shall remember me, and with their children they shall live and return. So, okay.
Yeah,
throughout this entire reading, like one of the big things that we've noted was that God is responsible for the exile ultimately, because while the people they were like sinning and stuff, and it did some of them tried to fix things and go back to the way it was, but God's like, hey, it's too late, too far gone.
You're too late.
Yeah, it was too late.
Too slow.
Yep.
So, we have often questioned the morality of these decisions, and not only is God were the Babylonians acting as an instrument of God's destruction, but then He punishes the Babylonians, right? Now, I don't think, at least kind of rare when we see a very clear admission, I scattered them among the nations. That hasn't popped up too much. There's been I sent the Babylonians to do this, right?
Yeah.
But this is very direct.
Yeah. I want to talk about this population, just to give some more context here. The concern for an expanded population, although clearly influenced by the traditional language of creation and of patriarchal promise, may at the same time reflect the prophet's awareness of the acute demographic decline of Palestine in the Babylonian and Persian periods.
Yeah.
Recent ethno-archaeological studies have used sophisticated analytical techniques to provide population estimates for various epochs in the biblical period. The Persian period is marked by a dearth of royal centers and market towns, and by a preponderance of rural estates. Tiny villages, 57% of Persian period settlements are labeled very small, i.e. with 11 to 30 families per village, and barely 11% of the settlements would have had more than 60 families per village, and isolated fortresses. Consequently, its population was shockingly small, especially during the Persian period, the end of which is the presumed backdrop for 2nd Zechariah. For Yehud itself, an analysis of excavated sites and surveyed areas, with possible undiscovered sites taken into account, yields a figure of approximately 10,000 people in the period. This figure was taken by calculations using a coefficient of 25 people per dunam, which is probably too large a figure given the evidence from the recent ethnographic studies of the area that would have constituted Yehud. Hence, the population of Yehud in the 6th and 5th centuries was probably considerably less than 10,000, perhaps as few as 8,000 or less. A prophetic vision of a prosperous restored land would thus entail a dramatic reversal in the existing demographic situation. Perhaps it was this bleak reality of the 5th century that influenced 2nd Zechariah to single out the northern diaspora for special attention. The restoration of all Israel to its former borders, as chapter 9 sets forth, is unimaginable without an enormous increase of population of both Judeans and Israelites to fill and secure the historical claims of the territory.
Yeah, and when everyone was coming back, even the population, not only is it smaller in many of these places, but it did get bigger in like coastal cities during I guess the time in the Persian period, I'd say, which was noted in that commentary.
Yeah.
So I will bring them from the land of Egypt and gather them from Assyria, and I will bring them to the land of Gilead and to Lebanon, till there is no room for them.
This invocation of lands to the south and to the far northeast is meant to express the comprehensiveness of the intergathering of exiles.
Yeah, I figured.
In the 4th century BCE, there was a substantial diaspora community in Egypt. Assyria no longer existed, but it had become a byword for distant exile.
Fair enough. And yeah, a lot of Jews did stay in Egypt. There was a pretty big community there.
Mm.
So.
But also Gilead designates the territory east of the Jordan. Sometimes it refers to a limited part of the Transjordan, and the biblical texts vary in what areas of the land across the Jordan are assigned to which tribes. However, it can also designate all of Transjordan.
So yeah, I guess it could mean quite a few things, but the same general area, I suppose.
Also, Lebanon is derived from the Hebrew word for white.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh. Probably because much of the heights of the area are snow-capped.
Oh, okay.
Of course.
Gotcha.
Lebanon refers in the Bible to the chain of mountains that begin in northern Palestine and continue northward for about 100 miles.
He shall pass through the sea of troubles and strike down the waves of the sea. And all the depths of the Nile shall be dried up. The pride of Assyria shall be laid low, and the scepter of Egypt shall depart.
So this is interesting. The sea, here it's sea of stress. And Alter doesn't even use that. He just says, he shall pass through the sea against the foe.
Oh, all right.
And Alter says he would be Israel, transformed by God into a mighty warrior. But the 3 Hebrew words of this verse set, We'avar bayam tsara, are cryptic. One possible literal rendering, and he shall pass through the sea in straits. Given the military context, the last of these 3 words have been construed as a collective noun meaning foe and against. It's probably implied by ellipsis. Now, the Myers they say the combination of sea with stress from SRR, to bind, tie up, restrict, is unique to this passage. The metaphoric reference of this phrase may be to the restricted lives of exiles in either Egypt or Mesopotamia. Many exegetes would prefer to amend the text and have it refer only to Egypt, the Sea of Egypt. It does not seem necessary to do so, however. If we are willing to credit 2nd Zechariah with creative use of language, and if we recognize that each of the tricola of this line concerns a sea, whatever nuances of sea of stress, it is clear that this phrase depicts the enemy or hostile forces that Yahweh must battle in order to release the dispersed Israelites.
You know, it's interesting that we have... maybe there's supposed to be like a parallelism where we have like Assyria supposed to be related to the Sea of Troubles or the waves of the sea, and then we have the specific reference to the Nile in Egypt. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's supposed to be divided up that way, or at least understood that way. I will make them strong in the Lord, and they shall walk in his name, declares the Lord. Who does he think he is? The Rock?
Mm-hmm.
Man, that's a very high charisma he must have.
Yep.
So that is the end of chapter 10. So if you guys are enjoying the stream so far, drop a like, subscribe if you haven't, share it around. We still got quite a few chapters to go. They're not like super long or anything.
Yeah.
The chapters, but they do exist. So it'd be interesting to hear what the people are thinking of all this.
Mm-hmm.
So we can get into chapter 10.
Chapter 11.
Chapter 11. I am bad at this.
Yes.
Maybe I haven't had enough coffee.
Drink more of your coffee.
I really should.
Why haven't you been?
I've had some.
Yeah.
This is the narrative that serves as a basis for the part in the Gospels.
Mm-hmm.
So you're gonna hear a lot of very familiar phrases. If you haven't read this, but you've read that Gospel narrative, you're gonna hear a lot of very familiar phrases.
That gospel narrative?
Well, yeah, the one about the field of blood.
Yeah. Well, you didn't bring that up before. You just said this is the part that is referenced by the Gospels and that gospel narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
It's a very famous narrative.
yeah. But no one would know what you're referring to just based off of that. You had to qualify it with additional information.
You're right.
Yeah.
Fine. Fair enough. That this is, yeah, it's the field of blood thing.
Okay.
And the potter. Yeah.
All right. Chapter 11. Open thy doors, O Lebanon, that the fire may devour thy cedars. Howl, fir tree, for the cedar's fallen, because the mighty are spoiled. Howl, O ye oaks of Bashan, for the forest of the vintage is come down. There is the voice of the howling of the shepherds, for their glory is spoiled. A voice of the roaring of young lions, for the pride of Jordan is spoiled. Thus saith the Lord my God, feed the flock of the slaughter, whose possessors slay them, and hold themselves not guilty, and they that sell them say, Blessed be the Lord, for I am rich, and their own shepherds pity them not. For I will no more pity the inhabitants of the land, saith the Lord, but lo, I will deliver the men every one into his neighbor's hand, and into the hand of his king, and they shall smite the land, and out of their hand I will not deliver them.
Wow, quite a lot to cover there.
In the first 6 verses.
Yeah. The sheep to be slaughtered. The prophet continues the metaphor of the leaders as shepherds and the people as their flocks. Here, the flock is bought and sold and slaughtered with impunity. Sad.
Yes, there can be a comparison with Isaiah 2:13, which mentions the fate of Lebanon's cedars and Bashan's oaks on the day of the Lord. It suggests that the verses are directed against natural features that arouse awe among humans.
So the section in verse 3, I believe, where it's like, hark the roar of lions for Jordan's, I have or at least Alter has, for Jordan's bends are ravaged.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, also the pride of Jordan. This technical phrase is used for the jungle or thicket found on both banks of the central and southern parts of the lower Jordan River before deforestation. The narrow strip of land at the bottom of the Rift Valley, characterized by a tropical ecosystem, was quite distinct from the barren wilderness and seasonal pasturelands that bordered it. Willows, cane, poplar, reeds. Yeah, they just list a whole bunch of trees. And tamarisks grew there. It was a place in which lions and other wild animals made their coverts. The word pride links this verse with the end of Zechariah 10:11, where we have the splendor of Assyria. And it's mentioned as one of the places from which the northern exiles will return.
All right. And I will feed the flock of slaughter, even you, O poor of the flock. And I took unto me 2 staves. The one I called beauty, and the other I called bands, and I fed the flock.
What was the second one
so
called?
What is this about?
Bands?
In verse 7.
Yeah, so, and I looked after the sheep to be slaughtered for the sheep traders, and I took me 2 staffs.
I took me 2 staffs.
I did. I took me 2 staffs. One I called pleasantness, and the other I called bruising.
Bruising.
And I looked after the sheep. Okay, so I don't know why there's not a note there on pleasantness, but so for bruising.
Okay. There's stuff that happens later on too.
That would help explain this, I'm guessing.
Yeah, the meaning of the staff named favor or pleasantness appears to be explained when it's broken in verse 10. It symbolizes an agreement with the surrounding nations to enable the people to live in peace. The staff named unity or beauty here symbolizes the desirability of unity between Judah and the northern kingdom, Israel. Yeah. But also that's bands.
Yes. So it
like
can
ban as in banning something?
No,
bands.
As in play
as in like
musicians.
no, as in like,
Manacles?
yeah, bands.
Wristbands.
Yeah.
Things that bind.
Bind. Gotcha.
The idea of 2 staffs involved in a symbolic prophetic action bears striking similarities to the account of 2 sticks in Ezekiel 37. In that passage, Ezekiel is instructed to take a stick inscribed for Judah and the Israelites associated with it, and to join it to another stick labeled for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and all the house of Israel associated with it. The result of the symbolic action in Ezekiel is the formation of 1 stick, which represents the reunification of north and south of Judah and Ephraim. And according to the last statement of the Ezekiel passage, it also represents God's covenant with Israel.
Okay.
Everything represents that. No, I'm kidding.
So let's continue on here. They have these 2 staves. 3 shepherds also I cut off in 1 month, and my soul loathed them, and their soul also abhorred me.
Yeah, let's talk about 3 shepherds.
Yeah, now, Eerdman says
they kind of come out of nowhere here.
The 3 shepherds is highly problematic. Some commentators regard the phrase as a later gloss, while others identify 3 Israelite or foreign rulers, from Saul, David, and Solomon at one extreme to Seleucus IV, Heliodorus, and Demetrius I in the period 185 to 150 BC at another extreme. While no attempt will be made here to identify the 3 shepherds, they do appear to be important in the allegory. Otherwise, there's no reason for the prophet to resign dramatically from his post. I suppose this occurs. The disposing of the 3 shepherds may be a further piece of acted symbolism. So
I'm gonna note here from the Myers. The existing literature on this verse, especially the discussions of this phrase, the 3 shepherds, can be summarized by the statement that verse 8 is the most enigmatic in the whole Old Testament. More than half a century earlier, Mitchell wrote that there were 40 proposed identifications of the shepherds. Prophets, kings, high priests, nations, peoples, and sundry leaders from the 8th to the 2nd century BCE have been proposed as the 3 shepherds. R.L. Smith, in resisting the temptation to follow the urge to identify the 3 shepherds with practical figures, characterizes this prophecy as an allegory, adopting the rather idiosyncratic view of A.F. Kirkpatrick, who wrote that no precise identification could be made, but that the 3 shepherds were part of the furniture of the allegory, and their removal by the prophet within a month is intended to signify God's intention to deal promptly and effectually with the oppressors of his people, whoever they may be. Commentators have been correct in pointing out that 3 is a significant number. It's also pretty small and appears a lot because it's just there a lot. Like there's 3 of a lot of things.
Yeah.
One that plays a special role in ancient Near Eastern number symbolism, as the smallest complete number. It represents wholeness or totality. That's also been 7 as well. It thus could well represent all the many shepherds, i.e. all the people in positions of power who are being held accountable for the decay of Israelite society.
So there's a number of ways that this could be interpreted.
Apparently 40, at least.
At least 40.
Yeah.
Let's discuss all of them.
No.
No.
Oh man.
So the point being that these are people who are not in God's favor, right? Then said I will not feed you. That dieth, let it die. And that is to be cut off, let it be cut off. And let the rest eat everyone the flesh of another. That
sounds like Deuteronomy 28 a little bit there.
Yeah, a little bit. You know, you got to hand it to them. They're very consistent in their curses.
That's true. That is true.
Yeah.
Curses.
Yeah, I don't know why Chris is just saying words and writing them down.
Yeah, he is.
I've said other things.
And I took my staff, even beauty, and cut it asunder, that I might break my covenant which I had made with all the people. And it was broken in that day. And so the poor of the flock that waited upon me knew that it was the word of the Lord. And I said unto them, if ye think good, give me my price, and if not, forbear. So they weighed for my price 30 pieces of silver.
Yep. So that is used. That's definitely used in the part where
it absolutely is used.
Yeah. With Jesus and Judas selling him out basically. So what verse is that exactly?
That's from verse 13.
Verse 13. Okay.
So I can definitely see how the New Testament would call back to this. Like betrayal of God for 30 pieces of silver, 30 shekels of silver.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is a paltry wage, according to Eerdmans.
Yeah, so for 30 pieces of silver. Let's see, they said that was verse 13, right?
Yes.
Okay. Just trying to pull it up here. All right, so for the 30 pieces of silver, this phrase occurs in opposition to my wage and literally reads 30 of silver. Virtually all commentators point out that such a sum of money is that which is due a slave owner in the event that an ox gores a male or female slave. Wow.
Yeah,
that's uncomfortable.
That was written about in the laws.
It was. So the language in Exodus is even more specific. The sum is silver 30 shekels worth. Commentators also suggest that it is a paltry sum because of the putative sarcastic reference to it in verse 13. This worthy sum. A similar price was paid by the prophet Hosea for the adulteress, half in cash and half in kind. However, it should be noted that silver was more valuable than gold until sometime in the Achaemenid period, after 500 BCE, when it became more plentiful. So that when the two are paired together, silver usually appears first. Oh, okay.
So we should also note that this is not a reference to future events.
It is not.
Yeah, this is definitely a reference to past events. No. Then I cut asunder mine other staff, even bands, that I might break the brotherhood between Judah and Israel. And the Lord said unto me, take unto thee yet the instruments of a foolish shepherd. For lo, I will raise up a shepherd in the land, which shall not visit those that be cut off, neither shall seek the young one, nor heal that is broken, nor feed that standeth still. But he shall eat the flesh of the fat and tear their claws in pieces.
So sorry, for verse 13, did we go over the potter's kiln? Did I miss that?
I took 30 pieces of silver and cast them into the pot, cast them to the potter in the house of the Lord.
Okay.
You did not go
over. All right, so
that.
The potter, right. So this is translated in a lot of ways, or I guess translated in a few ways, but so the Hebrew text reads literally to the potter, but is best rendered into the treasury, even though in this case a potter may be a temple functionary.
Actually, I didn't read that verse at all.
You didn't? Okay.
Yeah, I glossed over it because of the italicized 30 pieces of silver.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, the verse 13 reads, "And the Lord said unto me, cast it into the potter, a goodly price that I was prized at of them. And I took the 30 pieces of silver and cast them to the potter in the house of the Lord."
Okay, yeah, because it was in the quotation there. So,
Yeah.
so of course that is also exactly what happens with Judas as well. So, so it would be rendered into the treasury. Yeah, even though potter may be a temple functionary who deals with donations of precious metal, the temple context is assured because of the additional phrase "house of Yahweh" before the second use of "to the treasury" at the end of the verse.
Mm-hmm.
The word yosher as potter is problematic. Among the versions, the Syriac and Targum have oshar, treasury, as does the Kennecott manuscript. For yosher, in its second appearance in this verse, such an emendation, which we accept in both instances, supposes that a yod has been confused with an aleph, a possible scribal error, because 4 of the 5 letters of potter and treasury are the same. The reading of the more appropriate treasury is compelling. The Greek text, man, I really wish it wasn't transliterated because this is actually more difficult. Konuterion, a melting furnace, a word used to translate refiner's fire of Malachi 3:2, or smelter of 1 Kings 8:51. Sebo posits that one of these terms, probably Yosek, that's the smelter, may underlie the Masoretic text of Zechariah 11:12. He suggests that the Masoretic text is a composite form, a combination of Yosek, furnace or smelter, and Oshar, treasury, derived from 2 early variants in the history of the transmission of the text. Sabo's proposal is based on text-critical and grammatical considerations, although compelling in some ways. The idea of smelter being involved at one stage in the development of the Masoretic text is somewhat difficult to maintain. Yeah, because why would you need one there, I guess? However, some information provided by C.C. Torrey in his understanding of the word yosher, meaning potter, may be relevant. First, let us consider the noun yosher, which is derived from the root yesher, to fashion or form. This verb gives rise to the image of God as a potter, because, God as a potter, God as a workman, something like that. It happens all the time. Because it is part of the Genesis narrative describing God fashioning the first human in Eden. Similarly, many texts depict a human potter forming a vessel from clay. However, potter seems to make little sense in this context.
All right. So we're getting this promise of another shepherd. The Lord said unto me, take unto thee yet the instruments of a foolish shepherd. For lo, I will raise up a shepherd in the land, which shall not visit those that be cut off, neither shall seek the young one, nor heal that is broken, nor feed that standeth still, but he shall eat the flesh of the fat, and tear their claws in pieces. Woe to the idle shepherd that leaveth the flock! The sword shall be upon his arm, and upon his right eye. His arm shall be clean dried up, and his right eye shall be utterly darkened.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Sounds like someone's getting beaten up.
Yeah. The idea is that forsaking the flock would be destructive.
Yeah.
But that is the end of chapter 11.
Yeah. Now we're going on to chapter 12.
But do you hear something?
Yes, I do hear something.
There's something
To
in the airwaves.
Behold, I am your Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and I want to let all you heathens and sinners know that I support this wonderful episode of Atheist Sunday School. Lawrence and Reuben try their very best to bring you the true glory of the Bible, and they need your help. They have provided links to their Patreon page and other social media just for you. Once again, my name is Jesus Christ, and this is Milwaukee Atheists. The Lord is with them. God bless.
Oh, my God. Jesus. Hey, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for dropping in. We always appreciate that. We just read a story about how, I think your own personal experience is slightly based on this. It's very, very similar. You know that Judas guy? Yeah, he actually got all of his ideas from the guy from the story we read just now. He got all of his ideas from him. So there's that. Thanks for stopping in, though, Jesus. All right, so on to so we just finished chapter 11. We are on to chapter 12, and it looks like. Yeah, this is where the Lord will give salvation, apparently, which has been promised numerous times, but as of yet, I guess it kind of happens, but not like really, you know what I mean? So we can probably start it on that, but it seems like Reuben had disappeared, but he's back now, and he's dropping things.
Things needed to be dropped.
They did? Yeah, it's like that old
determinism.
It's like that old adage: if it's a thing, you can drop it.
What?
It's not an adage. All right, so we're on to chapter 12. And it looks like this is a different section, right? And this you have another oracle here because it starts off with the oracle of the word of the Lord.
There's disagreement among commentators about whether 12:1 to 13:6 is a unit, or whether it should be broken into smaller units such as 12:1, 2 through 9, 10 through 14, 13:1, 2 through 6. Certainly 12:1 could be originally separate or a fragmentary piece of material, including, as it does, a poetic hymnic clause similar to what is found in Amos 4:13. The passage then describes a divine action which Jerusalem will be besieged, and God strikes the horses and riders of Jerusalem's enemies with panic. In 12:2, it's not clear whether Judah will actually take part in the siege against Jerusalem or will also be afflicted by the siege. At any rate, after God's intervention, Judah will join in the battle and will benefit from divine help. Commentators who see Judah as being initially against Jerusalem then seek social or historical circumstances when this might have been so. But such conclusions drawn from a passage which has probably been expanded by numerous glosses are precarious. The repeated formula on that day indicates that future eschatological events are being referred to, and that the passage is using themes of battle and victory to assert the ultimate triumph of God's purposes. Following the victory, there will be a period of reflection and mourning, centering on someone pierced.
Yeah. I'm sure that's another thing that's been exploited in certain certain texts.
The passage is quoted in John's Passion narrative as they will look on the one whom they have pierced, and may be alluded to in Revelation 1:7. The Hebrew translation reads, "They will look upon me whom they pierced." The verb translated pierce having the sense of thrusting with a sword or javelin.
Right, so if the Hebrew translation is "they look upon me who they have pierced," then like, why are we trying to identify it with somebody else?
Yeah, but looking at the passage generally, one can say that even symbolic or eschatological battles must have casualties on the winning side.
Sure.
And that no contest with evil can be fought without cost. Sometimes the most bitter battles are fought within a community, and prophetic figures persecuted or even killed before that are later seen to have been right. Whatever it may mean, 12:10 through 14 are a necessary complement to all the language in Zechariah and elsewhere in the Bible about war, even when that language is figurative or indicates God's victory over evil. War involves great pain and suffering, especially for the innocent people who happen to be in the wrong place when the wars are fought.
That would kind of fit the historical context here.
Yes.
All right, either way. So now we are on to chapter 12. The oracle of the word of the Lord concerning Israel. Thus declares the Lord, who stretched out the heavens and founded the earth and formed the spirit of man within him. Behold!
Behold!
I am about to make Jerusalem a cup of staggering to all the surrounding peoples.
So,
Is that like the cup of wrath? But instead it's or so is this supposed to be like wine? Because you like stagger or something? Is it supposed to like be like drunkenness?
there's multiple things going on here. So let me get into it. Alter translates this as, I'm about to make Jerusalem a bowl of poison. He says the besiegers will imagine that they're about to overwhelm Jerusalem, but instead they themselves will be destroyed.
Yeah, because envisioning them as, I guess, a cup of poison would be, or even a cup of wine. But either way, if they're staggering, they're like, oh no. Like they're kind of like shaking in their boots.
Yeah. So
I'm going to finish off the verse here.
Yeah.
A cup of staggering to all the surrounding peoples. The siege of Jerusalem will also be against Judah. I feel like that's unnecessary to say, but perhaps historically it is necessary to say.
Yeah. So Alter says Judah too shall be caught in the siege. There's no caught in the Hebrew. This translation follows the precedent of two other modern English versions and adding it in order to avoid the impression that the kingdom of Judah is to take part in the siege against Jerusalem. And that's something that was brought up by Eerdmans, that there's disagreement over this. For this cup of reeling, they bring up Jeremiah 25 with the cup of the wine of wrath. And you know, it is what it is. It's a possible interpretation.
On that day, I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the peoples. All who lift it will surely hurt themselves, and all the nations on the earth will gather against it.
So the prophet's choice of a stone metaphor can perhaps be explained in part by his wish to link this oracle with the materials in 1 Zechariah, where stones figure prominently in several of the visions. In each instance, the stones of Zechariah 1 through 8 have positive connotations. The engraved stone, the premier stone, the lead stone, the gemstones of the crown. So this is a kind of reversal of the stuff that was in 1 Zechariah.
Gotcha. On that day, declares the Lord, I will strike every horse with panic and its rider with madness. But for the sake of the house of Judah, I will keep my eyes open when I strike every horse of the peoples with blindness.
Yeah, so this is a continuation of the previous metaphors of the bull and the stone.
Yeah.
Now it's translated into military facts.
For horses and their riders specifically.
Yeah, the enemy's horses will run amok, then go blind, and their riders will lose their minds, and thus the invading army will fall into fatal disarray.
You're right, that would be fatal disarray. Then the clans of Judah shall say to themselves, the inhabitants of Jerusalem have strength through the Lord of hosts, their God. On that day, I will make the clans of Judah like a blazing pot in the midst of wood, like a flaming torch among sheaves. And they shall devour to the right and to the left all the surrounding peoples, while Jerusalem shall again be inhabited in its place in Jerusalem.
So they're consuming enemies with fire, basically.
Yeah. I don't know if that's going to work out super well for them here. I assume this would have been written probably during the time of war, because...
Yeah, it's hard to imagine that during peacetime they would be writing about consuming all of the surrounding nations with fire.
Right, but I mean, like, you didn't have a takeover that already happened, because I don't think Jerusalem came out on top in those. So probably when there was a lot of worry about the control of the area.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Greco-Persian context would make sense.
Yeah.
And the Lord will give salvation to the tents of Judah first,
Yeah.
that the glory of the house of David and the glory of the inhabitants of Jerusalem may not surpass that of Judah.
Yes. So this is interesting here. The prophet introduces a somewhat surprising political note here. Even though Jerusalem is the capital, it should not think of itself as the exclusively important domain of God's people. And to that end, he will rescue the regions outside Jerusalem first. But the next verse offers a counterbalance to the statement. And also, the use of tent with Judah here is unique in the Bible. Although the combination of tent with the name of a tribe or a group may be a poetic way of referring to that group, e.g. tents of Edom, tents of Kedar, tents of daughter of Zion, it's not clear that the use of tent is to be taken as a sign of nomadic or semi-nomadic existence. Even the famous references to the tents of Jacob are not archaic allusions to patriarchal pastoral nomadism. Rather, the term for one kind of less substantial dwelling functions as an alternative word designating a habitation or home.
Even though it was thought to be that for a very, very long time. The glory of the inhabitants of Jerusalem may not surpass that of Judah. On that day, the Lord will protect the inhabitants of Jerusalem, so that the feeblest among them on that day shall be like David, and the house of David shall be like God, like the angel of the Lord going before them.
Yeah, so this is interesting. The house of David will be like God.
Yeah. Well, if the thing is, if you're elevating all the regular people to be like David, then the house of David would have to, where do you go from there?
But it's interesting here that the Hebrew uses the polyvalent Elohim, which can mean God, God's
like
divine
gods,
being,
guess,
divine beings. The first of these three senses should be excluded because it would be too extravagant and theologically inadmissible to say that the house of David was like God. Alter translates it as like a God.
Yeah, see, that is working off the assumption that it's inadmissible.
Yeah, but
like a God would make sense, fine, like that's fine, but to suggest that the other one isn't right.
But there are difficulties here. So, like, the Targum translates here, the house of David shall be like princes and shall flourish like kings. The Septuagint reads, the house of David will be like the house of God.
Okay.
Mason correctly turns to the book of Exodus for help in understanding this unusual, if not unique, expression. When Moses complains that he's unable to speak properly God's words, God reassures him that Aaron will be his stand-in. Quote, he shall speak for you to the people, and he shall be a mouth for you, and you shall be to him as God.
Okay. So as a mouthpiece, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I guess the understanding of like a priest would make sense.
A representative.
Yeah, a representative.
Yes, Justin. Yes.
All right, where were we here? Okay, and on that day, I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem. And now we're into the next. This is the section on him whom they have pierced.
Mm-hmm.
It was starting with verse 10. And I will pour out on the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of grace and pleas for mercy, so that when they look on me, on him who they have pierced, this is God talking apparently, they shall mourn for him as one mourns for an only child, and weep bitterly over him as one weeps over a firstborn.
Yeah, so many things here. Many things to go through. So first of all, Alter's translation. Alter says in verse 10, and I will pour out upon the house of David and upon Jerusalem's dwellers a spirit of grace and graciousness. And they shall look upon those who were stabbed and mourn for them like the mourning for an only child. And they shall grieve bitterly for them as one grieves bitterly for a firstborn.
So his is third person plural.
Yeah.
And in this translation, it would be a first person
Singular.
Sorry, third person singular.
Yeah, so Alter says nothing about that.
Unfortunate.
And he says that it's puzzling that a prophecy promising the destruction of Judah's enemies and the pouring out of a spirit of grace upon the people should conclude in this wave of desperate mourning. The least complicated explanation is Rashi's. In the battle to defend the city, many have fallen by the sword, and so the triumph is darkened by a deep sadness over these terrible losses. So there is apparently a tradition, or maybe from the Masoretic text, it is singular, or it is plural rather than singular. He doesn't specify, though. But if it goes back to Rashi, then clearly people have been using plural for this verse for a long time.
Yeah, at least for a while.
Yeah, so let me see about what they say here. So the outpourings of scholarly discussion do not center on the actual meaning of the word for stabbing, but rather the identity of the one stabbed, the identity of those who commit this act of violence, the meaning of such an act, the relationship, if any, of this deed to general historical reality, and the possible allusion of this text to a specific political event.
Yeah.
The word does not mean to kill, but to stab with the thrusting weapon, notably a sword. In several instances, it's clear that the victim of such an attack died, but the very addition of another term, and he died, indicates that although death would be expected because sword thrusts generally inflicted mortal wounds, this would not be necessarily or always the case. Indeed, Jeremiah 37:10 mentions wounded soldiers who remain in their tents, and Jeremiah 51:4 may also indicate serious but non-fatal battle wounds. The question of whether the stabbed one in this verse has in fact died thus remain open.
Well, I'm guessing with the mourning, it's more likely that they would. So yeah, there is some stuff in here in Erdmann's on this section. So following the victory, there will be a period of reflection and mourning centering on someone pierced. This passage is quoted in John's Passion narrative.
Yeah, I brought that up.
You did, yeah. So you're talking about the thrusting being the proper translation, like the piercing through, not necessarily killing. But yeah, they also in Erdmann's note that it's weird to say that you have like God being stabbed. Mm-hmm. So it's certainly strange. So modern versions mostly prefer look on him or look on the one, which is apparently read by some Hebrew manuscripts. Various attempts have been made to identify it with no.
Yeah, they specify that this. Some people argue for this being a reference to Micah of Morashah, Jeremiah 26:18, or Uriah ben Shemaiah of Kirath Jearim. The latter was killed with sword by King Jehoiakim through the instigation of all his warriors and all the officials.
Yeah, and then
but they argue here against it being a reference to any specific historical event.
Maybe it references like a few or like a series of them maybe. Mm-hmm. Again, no convincing solution has been proposed. It is just possible that they have pierced refers not to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, but to Jerusalem's enemies, in which case the pierced one would be a leader in Jerusalem or a figure representative of all those who had perished.
And I want to see if they do this in... So here they use... they translate this differently through the Anchor Bible.
Okay.
They say, on that day I will seek to annihilate all the nations that come against Jerusalem. Then I will pour out on the house of David and on the leaders of Jerusalem a spirit of favor and supplication, so that they will look to me concerning the one they have stabbed. They will mourn him for one as who mourns for the only child and grieve for him as one who grieves for the firstborn. So here, this is not Yahweh referring to himself.
Yeah.
They're referring to, I guess, someone from the house of David who gets stabbed. But this changes between
versions,
and it's not exactly clear why, because none of them.
I mean, I'm guessing
really,
it would have to be the textual traditions that or the manuscripts that they're using.
Yeah. So these surely these different manuscripts have different like tenses and things that are used here, but they don't like summarize the actual choice for using it here. So, which is weird because usually they would. Yeah.
Yeah, that is unfortunate. But I guess at some point I was going to learn Hebrew, right? So why not? First thing I do when I learn Hebrew is read this verse in a whole bunch of manuscripts.
Yeah.
And then we do have a Greek version as well, so maybe I'm sure that played a role in it too. So, all right, let's continue on here. Either way, we don't exactly know who this is talking about. There's no good solution. Unfortunate. So, on that day, the mourning in Jerusalem will be as great as the mourning for Hadad Rimmon in the plain of Megiddo.
Yeah, so Hadad, Rimmon, these are two Canaanite gods, here conflated, as they may have been in popular religion.
Yeah, especially so late in the game, it would they wouldn't really care to separate them anymore. It's not like it's their gods. So
yeah, I want to go into this. The mourning indicates that Hadad Rimmon was a dying god, like Tammuz, and like the Greek Adonis, whose annual descent into the underworld was marked by rites of grief. Mm-hmm. But the proper name, which occurs only here in the Bible, is composed of two elements. Hadad, the West Semitic storm god identified with Baal in the Ugaritic text from Ras Sharma, and Rimmon, apparently a variant of Raman, and another name for Hadad. See 2 Kings 5:18, which mentions a temple to Rimmon where the Aramean general Naaman wants to worship Yahweh. The root, RMM, in West Semitic is associated with storms, and Rimmon can thus mean thunderer.
Yeah.
However, the root cannot be separated from a similar root, RWM, which means to be high, elevated, exalted. Such a meaning for a place name may be just as likely. Although Rimmon could be used as the name of 3 different places in the Bible, none of these would qualify as being in the plain of Megiddo. Hence, the possibility that one or both of these terms is a toponym seems remote. Rather, the association of this name with extreme mourning, which is what this verse accomplishes in providing the kind of 3 comparisons that indicate the intensity of grief to be displayed by the house of David, it may be understood as a reflection of one aspect of the cult of Baal, or Hadad Rimmon. From the Ras Sharma text, 4 major annual festivals can be identified in the cult of Baal. One of these, the Festival of Mourning, was probably related to the idea of the dying god involved in the rites of mourning by the worshippers of Hadu Baal. Moreover, the god Raman is not known to have had any mourning rites associated with him, only by his connection with Hadu Baal. And because of this reference in Zechariah, such rites can be only by this connection with Hadu Baal, and because of this reference in Zechariah, can such rites be suggested for this deity. It is thus compelling, given our knowledge about mourning customs associated with Baal and Rimmon, to accept this name pair as a reference to such customs. However, because this name is known nowhere else, and because the plain of Megiddo has another connection with mourning, the possibility that another allusion is present instead of or in addition to this one must not be excluded.
That is interesting that they would mention that here.
Yeah.
If this in fact refers to like a dying god.
Yeah.
The land shall mourn, each family by itself. the family of the house of David by itself, and their wives by themselves, and the family of the house of Nathan by itself. And that was his prophet, right? That was David's like core prophet.
It's used for 7 or 8 different individuals in the Hebrew Bible. Nowhere else is this name preceded by house of. Clearly, the most prominent Nathan is the prophet who lived at the time of King David.
Yeah. Yeah, and their wives by themselves, the family of the house of Levi by itself, and their wives by themselves, the family of the Shimeites by itself, and their wives by themselves, and all the families that are left, each by itself, and their wives by themselves. So
Shimeites, it might be a number of things. The Greek and Symmachus have family of Simeon, all right, but Shimei appears 43 times as a personal name in the Hebrew Bible, as in reference to at least 15 different individuals.
Great.
So they're just listing families, basically.
Yeah, it's interesting that so many are left out, though. Like, these seem like more important ones. Like, you have a prophet class. Well, you could call it like a prophet. I don't know what the closest related Shimei would be to David. But if you have like David and then, Nathan to represent the prophets, Levi to represent the priests, then maybe Shimei is supposed to represent something else there.
Maybe.
That's just my guess. That's my guess. I don't actually know.
That's the end of chapter 12. If you're enjoying the stream so far, give us a like, comment, subscribe, share it with your friends, family,
See,
neighbors.
I'd be a little butthurt if it was over 2 hours, remember?
I don't care.
You can be butthurt if you want.
Last as long as the show lasts.
Now we're in chapter 13.
Yes, chapter 13.
In that day, there shall be a fountain open to the house of David and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem for sin and for uncleanness. And it shall come to pass in that day, saith the Lord of hosts, that I will cut off the names of the idols out of the land, and they shall no more be remembered. And also I will cause the prophets and the unclean spirit to pass out of the land. So this is just purification stuff that they're going over. The fountain. Okay. And it shall come to pass that when any shall yet prophesy, then his father and his mother that begat him shall say unto him, Thou shalt not live, for thou speakest lies in the name of the Lord. And his father and his mother that begat him shall thrust him through when he prophesieth. So this is the end of the prophets. No more prophets. If you prophesy after this point in time, you are lying, and it is the responsibility of anyone who hears you doing it, even your own parents, to kill you.
Yeah, it's a lot. It got very intense kind of all of a sudden, didn't it?
Mm-hmm. And it shall come to pass in that day that the prophets shall be ashamed, every one of his vision, when he hath prophesied. Neither shall they wear a rough garment to deceive, but he shall say, I am no prophet, I am a husbandman, for man taught me to keep cattle from my youth.
Wow, okay.
So basically, it's like, no, you're not a prophet. You're just a common, everyday person.
Yeah.
Nothing special.
Exactly. Although the translation here is kind of different. In Alter, I am no prophet, I am a tiller of the soil. Confronted with... we just talked about, like, no, you have nothing special to you, but it's interesting that they have tiller of the soil there.
Mm-hmm. I'm assuming that it means that they're not particularly wealthy.
Right. They're just a regular person. Yeah. A commoner.
Yeah. And one shall say unto him, What are these wounds in thine hands? Then he shall answer, Those with which I was wounded in the house of my friends.
Yeah.
Now that's an interesting verse.
Yeah. So I was bruised in the house of my friends. Is the translation that's used by the Myers. The person queried about the marks on his back responds with a denial that they were received through flagellation, presumably of the sort certain members of the prophetic guilds practiced by asserting a different origin for his bruises. Using Okay, so yeah, he admits to having been bruised, but the next phrase provides an explanation that precludes an association of the marks on his back with any sort of false prophecy.
Now, this is on his hands in the KJV.
Yeah, so let me just check a few translations here because this is just classic. Okay. So I'm going to read the translation from Alter, which, again, gives another translation. So, and one shall say to him, what are these wounds on your chest?
It's different.
And he shall say, because I was struck in the house of my lovers. Which in the Greek would be the same, but I'm not sure if that would maintain in the Hebrew. But the wounds on your chest, his own body bears evidence against him. The wounds would be gashes self-inflicted or made by others, as one sees with the prophets of Baal in 1 Kings 18.
I see. The chest wounds, Hebrew meaning, these wounds between your hands.
Okay, between your hands. Yeah, so they have between your shoulders written down.
Yeah.
Okay, so literally between your hands. The idiom is known at Ugarit, where shoulder is used with between the hands. A similar expression in 2 Kings 9:24, between the shoulders, uses zeroa, which can mean arm or shoulder. The normal word for hand, yad, which is used in this instance, is not always sharply differentiated from the anatomical parts with which it is associated, the wrist, arm, or even shoulder. Thus, hands here is a kind of I can't even pronounce that word. Synecdoche. Synecdoche, is that how it's pronounced? Okay. Representing the upper extremities, so that bruises between the hands signify marks on either the chest or back.
Yeah, so Eerdmans says that these marks are usually taken to be self-inflicted wounds administered during periods of ecstasy. See for reference 1 Kings 18:28.
Yeah. So that would make sense then why it would be. I guess it would make most sense if it was on the back, because that's usually how they did that. But anyways, he's saying that no, it wasn't that. And in the house of my friends, the word rendered friends is a plural participle. So like being. Wait, why is it a participle? That's weird. Okay. Elsewhere in the Hebrew, it refers to adulterous lovers or relations with prostitutes, or more figuratively, to lovers, as those rather than Yahweh with whom Jerusalem or Judah has been intimate. However, it would make no sense to have a person disclaiming the role of false prophet to be admitting to another unacceptable activity. Thus, this participle must reflect what another part of the semantic range of the verb to love denotes, namely the strong emotional connection between friends, even though such human affection is normally conveyed by a different participle.
Now we have a more interesting verse here. Awake, O sword, against my shepherd, and against the man that is my fellow, saith the Lord of hosts. Smite the shepherd, and the sheep shall be scattered, and I will turn mine hand upon the little ones.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's kind of the thing from Psalms, right? Maybe.
But what is this, Lawrence?
Turn my hand against the little ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. So that's verse 7. But Alter translates it as, and I will bring my hand back against the shepherd lads. So not quite the same, but I guess
Still lads.
Yeah, so
children.
The Hebrew tzoarim means assistant shepherds, which would refer figuratively to people in the royal court and administration.
Oh, so this is bureaucrats. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it shall come to pass that in all the land, saith the Lord, 2 parts therein shall be cut off and die, but the 3rd part shall be left therein. And I will bring the 3rd part through the fire, and I will refine them as silver is refined, and will try them as gold is tried. They shall call on my name, and I will hear them. I will say, it is my people, and they shall say, the Lord is my God. And that is some imagery that we've gotten before.
Yeah.
The purification through fire. And it's also the end of chapter 13. And now we move on
to the final chapter of Zechariah.
Yes.
And the final chapter for today's reading.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm going to hand these off to you. Hey, I know it's been quite a long stream, but if you're still here for whatever reason, thank you. That's very much appreciated. Share the stream around. You know, we still got some juicy stuff to talk about. Yeah, maybe not as juicy as before. I think the juiciest stuff is
Behind you.
What?
It's in the past.
Yes, it's in the past. I mean, you said behind me, so I was going to be like, this doesn't look very juicy, does it? This background? That's not very juicy. So, can't be that. So yeah, we can hop into chapter 14, and this is about the coming day of the Lord. So this is where it gets very eschatological.
Yes.
And it looks like we have disappeared, and we're back. Okay.
Yeah,
There's
so
a juicy background. I had to show him.
Gotcha.
a lot of the things that we're going to encounter here are typical Day of the Lord stuff.
Yeah, so stuff we've seen a million times.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of commentary, but I don't know how much of it will actually be referencing.
So I think a good chunk of it might be about anything that's relevant to Jesus, because you see there's stuff about the Mount of Olives here, which of course plays a crucial role in the Jesus narrative. So,
yeah.
All right. Let's see. Chapter 14. Behold!
Behold!
A day is coming for the Lord, when the spoil taken from you will be divided into your midst. For I will gather all the nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, and the houses plundered, and the women raped. Oh, God.
Yeah.
Half of the city shall go out into exile, but the rest of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Then the Lord will go out and fight against those nations as when he fights on a day of battle. On that day his feet shall stand on the Mount of Olives that lies before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall be split in two from east to west by a very wide valley, so that one half of the mount shall move northward and the other half southward.
Split a mountain.
So the Mount of Olives is going to be split in half.
Yeah.
So God's principal weapon in this battle is an earthquake. That's what Alter has to say about it. Now,
that would make sense because it does talk about an earthquake later on in the passage. And it references. Do you remember when we were talking about the earthquake in the days of Uzziah? We were trying to figure out when, I forget which book it was. Was it Amos? I think it was Amos.
It might have been Amos.
And we had Landon on, so he was looking up stuff about eclipses.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I'd have to go back and rewatch the episode, but we kind of placed the time of the earthquake and the time of the writing based on that stuff.
Yep. I remember that.
Yeah. So
I think it was Amos. It may
the
have
Mount
been
of
Amos.
Olives. This is the only place in the Hebrew Bible in which the exact term occurs. Undoubtedly, this designation arose because of the abundance of olive trees that grew on the mountain in antiquity. The Mount of Olives on the east side of the city is actually a ridge approximately 2.5 miles long running north-south. It is separated from the Temple Mount and the city of Jerusalem by the Kidron Valley, which has always formed the city's eastern boundary. The Kidron begins in a broad valley just north of the present old city of Jerusalem near Meshararim and is called the Valley of Simon the Just, or the Wadi el-Joz in Arabic. It continues from there to the east and south between the city and intersection of the Mount of Olives with Mount Scopus.
I think a whole bunch of stuff was thrown into the Kidron River as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, Mount of Olives, it's going to be split apparently. And you shall flee to the valley of my mountains, for the valley of the mountains shall reach to Azal. And you shall flee as you fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. Then the Lord my God will come, and all the holy ones with him. So that's gonna this could easily be interpreted as a symbol of end times. I could see how that's gonna happen.
Yeah, people
like
are
I know
panicking. They're running around. They're going crazy.
Yeah, the earthquakes. You know, when you don't understand geology. I mean, it's scary even if you do understand geology, but like it's not end of the world scary.
Except when it's that earthquake that's the end of the world, that one.
Yeah, that one's really scary.
Remember the movie 2012? That already happened. That was really bad.
There's an interesting bit here. It says, and the valley of my mountains shall be blocked as the valley of the mountains reaches as far as Azal.
Yeah, Azal.
Right? And Azal or Azal as a place name from the syntax and context. However, such location in the Jerusalem area remains unknown or unidentified. Yet the existence of Beth Azel in Micah 1:11 may be of significance in establishing its validity as a toponym, as may its appearance as a designation for a Benjamite descendant of Jonathan, apparently living in Jerusalem in 1 Chronicles. Because of the difficulty in locating Azel, and because the Septuagint has a different reading, Yasad, either Jashad or a proper name or foundation, neither of which is particularly helpful, many would amend the text to aslo, its side. This suggestion understands aslo to come from the preposition asel, meaning besides, in a substantive sense.
Yeah.
But basically this is an unknown.
As is tradition. Yeah, then the Lord my God will come and all the holy ones with him. Now to verse 6. On that day there shall be no light, cold, or frost, and there shall be a unique day, which is known to the Lord, neither day nor night, but at evening time there shall be light.
So,
wow.
It says, Alter says, there shall be no daylight nor chill moonlight. He says, this is the construction of many modern versions, but the Hebrew is cryptic. So, this is a guess.
Great, okay. But I mean, from the way that it is in the ESV, it would be like, remember, all this stuff in Ecclesiastes about everything to their time, everything to its path, right? This would be very much not that. So it would signify the end times when you have a bunch of things that shouldn't be, just being. Like, why is the sun out at night? This is weird. Or at least light. Like, you shouldn't have that. Mm-hmm. So, on that day, living waters shall flow out from Jerusalem.
This is fresh waters. We've had this symbol before. It may be inspired by the stream flowing out of the temple in Ezekiel 47. It may be related to the fountain that was brought up before.
Could be related to that. I doubt it. Yeah, it doesn't look like it would be because, on that day, living waters shall flow out from Jerusalem, half of them to the eastern sea and half of them to the western sea. It shall continue in summer as in winter.
Well, you see, the Bible predicted climate change, Lawrence.
Nice.
Not quite like this. Not in a norm like a scientific way. This is very eschatological.
Yeah.
And the Lord will be king over all the earth. On that day, the Lord will be one and his name one. And of course, you got the stuff in Deuteronomy and the stuff in Exodus.
Very common.
Yeah. His name will be one.
Yeah.
The whole land shall be turned into a plain from Geba to Rimmon, south of Jerusalem. But Jerusalem shall remain aloft on its site from the gate of Benjamin to the place of the former gate, to the corner gate, and from the tower of Hananel to the king's wine presses. The king's wine presses?
Yep.
Yeah, this would just be like places around.
Yeah. Okay. I guess
they're basically saying that the commentaries go into where these gates would be.
They're establishing a border, maybe.
Yeah, it's basically like that.
Okay. And it shall be inhabited, for there shall never again be a decree of utter destruction. So, Jerusalem shall dwell in security. I guess at the end of time, perhaps nothing will ever happen to you again because it's the end of time.
Now, what verse was that?
That was verse 11.
Verse 11.
Yeah, ending with Jerusalem shall dwell in security.
Okay.
So we still waiting on this. I know a lot of people, they like to come up with when the end time will be, and they've all been wrong. Every last one of them.
But they keep guessing.
They keep going. And now on to verse 12.
Yeah.
And this shall be the plague with which the Lord will strike all the peoples that wage war against Jerusalem. Their flesh will rot while they are standing on their feet. Their eyes will rot in their sockets, and their tongues will rot in their mouths.
Yeah, so
that rots.
They rot apart. Is basically the idea here.
A lot of radiation. That's what this is. It's like, I know that I think Chris and I have talked about this, but I forget the dude's name, but there was this snake oil cure for like everything called Radithor.
Yeah,
but it was just water and radium. And that was, back in like what the 20s, no, not the 20s, even before the 20s. No, it was the 20s, I think. And like they didn't
the dude's mouth rot off.
Yes,
that was what that was.
He was taking Radithor. He was drinking like multiple bottles of Radithor a day, and initially he felt great, like all of his pain went away and stuff like that, until one day his jaw fell off.
Oh,
and then he died pretty much after that.
Soon after, because his jaw fell off, just right off, because it's radiated water.
Necrosis.
Yeah,
it died from rad.
Yeah,
poisoning.
Yeah, radiation. So,
fuck.
Yeah. So this guy
pretty hardcore.
Yeah. So this kind of reminds me of that. Or there's that one guy who, I think it was in Japan, right? Like they were working on like a reactor or something, and it like, I forget if it was a meltdown or what it was that happened. But
he got flash by like a bunch of high intensity radiation. And basically
it killed like, every one of his cells.
Well, they weren't dead.
Well, they were dead because
never reproduce.
Yeah.
They're genetically dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So because they couldn't reproduce,
he died over a period of like a month.
Like because he had no physical damage, but there was no way for his cells to reproduce. So he just, I think I called it like
to death, basically.
Yeah, he basically fell apart.
Horrible.
Yeah, right. And it, that's intense. And they kept him alive for a while too. God, that was a mess.
This had been unheard of before.
Yeah, that was a messed up story though.
Yeah,
like he was just like, please let me fucking die.
Yeah, you would be like that.
Yeah, wouldn't you if you're in that state? Yeah, absolutely.
You are screwed. May as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, we really went off track. Okay, that was mostly me that I went off track. My bad.
You
Get some sleep.
But either way, people will be rotting while standing. Yep. That is what's going to happen to them.
How we got there.
And on that day, a great panic from the Lord shall fall on them, so that each will seize the hand of another, and the hand of the one will be raised against the hand of the other. Even Judah will fight at Jerusalem, and the wealth of all the surrounding nations shall be collected, gold, silver, and garments in abundance.
Yeah, so Hebrew language allows this to be construed as Judah fighting against Jerusalem. And a few scholars have proposed a background of bitter enmity between the population in Jerusalem and the inhabitants of the outlying districts, but this seems unlikely.
And a plague like this plague shall fall on the horses, the mules, the camels, the donkeys, and whatever beasts may be in those camps. Now, this is probably the most interesting version of the Day of Judgment, because we didn't have like these in-depth descriptions of this Day of Judgment, but now it's like
at least not in the Bible.
Yeah, not in the Bible. Everything will rot.
It's very much like Indiana Jones. When they open the Ark of the Covenant and everybody's just like their flesh melts off immediately.
Yeah.
That's what they were like.
Exactly. So it's like that. Then everyone who survives all of the nations that have come against Jerusalem shall go up year after year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Booths. And it's interesting that that's the... Okay, so no, we have a lot of Feast of Booths stuff here, but it's interesting that that's the one that is mentioned.
This is the fall festival.
Yeah.
Because it's celebrated after the labor of harvesting, drew the largest throngs of pilgrims. Evidently, the obligation of the Sundry Nations is just this festival and not all three pilgrim festivals.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's weird that only this one is mentioned, and it's mentioned a few times. So, yeah, and if any of the families of the earth do not go up to Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, there will be no rain on them.
So let's talk about this Booths festival. Booths entailed the celebrants re-experiencing the temporary wilderness dwellings in which Israelites lived during their journey from Egypt to the Promised Land. So not fulfilling the Festival of Booths is basically like forgetting about the Exodus, right?
Right. So I understand, why it is important. It's just interesting that that's the only one that's mentioned here, because there are a lot of ways to remember a whole bunch of stuff, right?
Yeah, why is Sukkoth, Booths, the holiday featured in this passage? Is it meant to stand alone as an all-inclusive festival, or would the nation celebrate other festivals too? These questions can be approached by considering the special status of Sukkoth in the post-exilic and later periods. For this feast, apparently occupied a place of prominence among the three agriculturally based pilgrim festivals during the Second Temple era, if not earlier. Perhaps the most telling sign of preeminence attached to this holiday is the fact that in several biblical passages it is simply called the feast, as if there were none other from which it needed to be distinguished. This is just an extremely important festival.
Gotcha. Yeah. Let's see. Where were we here? No rain will be upon the people that don't come to worship. And if the family of Egypt does not go up and present themselves, then on them there shall be no rain. There shall be the plague with which the Lord afflicts the nations that do not go up to keep the Feast of Booths. This shall be the punishment to Egypt and the punishment to all the nations that do not go up to keep the Feast of Booths.
Yeah, so they specify this about Egypt because Egypt has the Nile, so they don't depend on the rain as a water source.
Yeah, that's true. And on that day there shall be inscribed on the bells of the horses, Holy to the Lord. And the pots in the house of the Lord shall be as the bowls before the altar. And every pot in Jerusalem and Judah shall be holy to the Lord of hosts, so that all who sacrifice may come and take of them and boil the meat of the sacrifice in them. And there shall no longer be a traitor in the... And this is not like traitor isn't. This is traitor as in Trader.
Like as in somebody who trades things.
Yes. Person who trades.
Not the guy who backstabs
not a
you.
traitor.
Yeah.
And shall no longer be a traitor in the house of the Lord of hosts on that day. Now that is the end of Zechariah. We talked about the importance of the Feast of Booths, and it's in a way like this of course does take up the stuff we've heard about a whole bunch of times of how the end times is basically like a new Jerusalem new heaven, new earth kind of thing, like this complete revisioning of reality as we know it. So that does take up exactly that. And I did like hearing about the more specific, everyone just rots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very specific.
It was, and more than we've had before. Also, yeah, Wesley, don't if you want to be a good Christian, you shouldn't. I mean, you can use the KJV if you want as a translation, but you absolutely should not have it be the only one, because it is demonstrably based on poor manuscripts. They are late manuscripts, and we have ones that are older, ones that are more reliable, ones that are better. Now, you can say that the translation is, fine, and it was done by a whole bunch of people, and that's all well and good. But the fact is, they didn't have access to the same manuscripts we do now. And the fact that we have better manuscripts now, and we have better methods of textual criticism, we can have better translations. So,
yeah, because not everything's a dragon.
Right, yeah,
most of it,
right, you would have
jackal. Come on,
you would have to understand all the stuff in context. That's one thing, but based on the manuscript evidence alone, you can feel free to use the KJV, but to say that it's the only legitimate one, you're just wrong, and pretty much every scholar is going to disagree with you. So don't be a KJV onlyist.
Except Reuben.
Yeah, except Reuben.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah.
The
I
KJV,
love that KJV.
best translation. Dragons. Yeah. So we finished the book of Zechariah. The final thoughts on the book of Zechariah. Best parts, worst parts, etc. Rating.
Well, the part that sounded, the part that was like almost exactly like Haggai, not that great. But then I thought it was cool to have some inclusion with some context for the Greco-Persian Wars.
I think that I would have liked more explanation onto the end of prophets.
Yeah,
that'd be nice. Yeah,
very abrupt place to throw this. There was nothing like this before in the Bible, and I don't think there's much after this.
Right.
So I would have loved more.
I think that's basically what makes the second part of Zechariah important, right?
Yeah,
it establishes the end of prophets, and it also goes into actual details about eschatology that we didn't have before at all.
It almost slips a little into the apocryphal realms in terms of their content choice.
Well, the thing is, it wouldn't be right because it is canon, but
of course, I'm just saying in tone.
I mean, yeah, in comparison to all the other stuff we've read, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it really stands out among the minor prophets.
It does, yeah.
Honestly,
they got some cool visions at the beginning.
It was okay at the beginning, but this raises my opinion of the book quite a bit, because I don't think any other book is going to be as impactful after this, almost, because they got rid of prophets. That was, they were the most important facet of most of the stories outside of.
Well, that hasn't happened yet.
Right. But it will happen.
Not in the books.
No, because they're prophets.
No, it's foretelling of future events that's not fulfilled.
Where everyone rots afterwards too and stuff. Fun times.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Rotting. That's great.
The first part of Zechariah, well, we already gave our thoughts about first Zechariah last week.
Yeah,
so
it did have interesting visions. I enjoyed those, even though sometimes it was very bureaucratic.
Yeah,
but that's okay.
But for being so unique about in comparison to the other minor prophets, I would say that Zechariah definitely gets at least an 8 out of 10.
I'd say an 8. Yeah, the only thing that brings it down are the stuff that we've seen in like all the woes against nations stuff.
Yeah,
the entire idea of that.
Sometimes
that brings it down.
Sometimes maybe it would be better if we had a better idea about a lot of the stuff. Like, there are phrases in there that are unique to Zechariah. There are things that we have no idea what they're referencing, like the 3 shepherds.
Right.
So, yeah, it would be nice.
Maybe I should write that one down as a research topic. That one's going to not be possible for me, though, at least not at this point. But I think as a potential one at some point in the future, or the 3 shepherds. So I think that would be an interesting project to work on.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's the book of Zechariah. Now, next week, we are reading
Here we go.
Malachi, the final episode of the Old Testament, the final book of the Old Testament. We're finishing the Old Testament. It only will have taken 222 weeks.
Don't remind me.
Okay, that's a lot of weeks, people.
Multiple hours a week sometimes.
Almost 4 years. Almost.
No, it would be 4 years.
No,
Yeah.
Yeah.
would it?
Yeah, it's over 4 years. Just over 4 years.
Just over? Okay. Just over 4 years. Ridiculous amount of reading here.
Yeah, right?
We've been covering it all in extraordinary depth. You better appreciate it.
Like, share, sub. Here we go.
So we have
Yeah,
a
what are we-
Patreon.
Hold on before we get into that. Sorry. What book are we covering after the Testament of Job? Did we fully decide on that yet?
I thought we were doing the Shem one.
The Treatise of Shem?
Yes.
Yeah, it's an astrological book.
Okay. Yeah, I suppose we can do that one.
Yeah.
We had some few ideas floating around, I think.
So I'm pretty sure on Friday we're finishing up the Testament of Job.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, we should be.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so join us then when we do that. Otherwise, check out our Patreon. We had our t-shirt giveaway at the beginning of this episode. But if you just want to buy yourself a t-shirt, you can check out this pinned merchandise right here and buy yourself.
Also, there were a couple people that if you are a patron and and your card was declined, that's a potential thing. Like there would have been like another person on the wheel, but the card was declined. So yeah, if you're wondering about that, then that's your answer. So why they were not on the wheel. So
Yeah.
so it may have been declined. I don't know. If you are a patron, but you should become a patron because you got lots of cool stuff. In fact, next week we're going to be doing our patron hangout after the show with Landon.
Yep.
And yeah, so if you want to join in on that, you can be a patron. You can win T-shirts and videos. You can see video scripts and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Lots of interesting stuff. And let's see what else do we have.
We have an Amazon wish list full of books. You can add to this table. You can add to our bookshelves. We can read them to you. We can read about them to you. We can just read them.
Links to all this stuff is in the description, along with our Facebook and Twitter, where it is completely free to follow. It costs you $0.
And you know what? It's also free to like and subscribe and click that bell.
That's true. Click the bell. That helps a lot because if you stop by, that'd be great.
Yep.
We'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's all the shilling.
That's all the shilling. Long episode today.
It was, but we got a lot covered.
Yep. And so I think it's fine to tell them that we will see
you
them on Friday
and then
Sunday for the end of the Old Testament.
The end of the Old Testament. It's gonna be amazing.
It's over.
Yep. It's the